This is Pastor Steve Kelly on this beautiful, beautiful Monday afternoon here on my back patio. Looking at the weather, it reminds me of yesterday morning as we got the privilege of meeting on Mother's Day in the rear parking lot at the church. Had a tremendous time, had a lot of folks come out to be with us. Many stayed in their vehicles, got to roll their windows down, had a nice little breeze. Others chose to have their lawn chairs and to sit out in the lot. Some actually chose to sit under some trees toward the front of the church where they could still look through and see us. Others even listened on the radio and many on Facebook Live. So what a tremendous time to be with us yesterday. However, there is good news today. Many of you may already be aware that our governor here in Louisiana made the decision earlier today to enter phase one of getting back to work, and in our case, getting back to church. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means we can have 25% of our capacity in our facilities. So we are going to 2 worship services beginning this coming Sunday, which will be May the 17th. We will have a 9 a.m. service followed by an 11 a.m. service. And what we're going to do is ask our senior adults, we'll just call those age 60 and above, to try and come to the first service, and then those that are younger than that to seek to come to the second. Now, if you don't fit in either of those age groups and you choose to go to the opposite service, we're not going to turn you away. However, we would like to give courtesy to our older folks so that they can be in the same place at the same time, because they have taken extra precautions not to be around people, which would mean they would have less likelihood of being able to carry anything in terms of the germs related to this virus. So please be aware of that. We will not have preschool church, nor will we have children's church, and then Sunday school is way out until we have a better handle on the occupancy issue, because our classroom size is so much smaller than the sanctuary. Well, we will be seating you in alternating rows. Our rows are 6 feet apart in alternating rows, so we can accommodate that. And there will be some spacing we'll discuss once you get to the building. We're all going to ask people that if they wish to please bring their masks. I have had someone that has agreed to make masks for us, so we do have a number of them that will be available when you come on a Sunday. So we do look forward to getting back to church. It will be very different, and that's just the nature of the game right now in the world in which we live. So we'll just have to accommodate that as we move along. But some of you might say this, Brother Steve, I'm really scared. Can I ever go back to church? Am I ever going to be able to go back to the church house and feel comfortable? Well, I believe we all will. This is like anything else, that it comes and it goes. Fear is great, and then it subsides. Sickness may explode in terms of numbers, but then it gradually diminishes, and I believe we're looking toward that by the statistics that we're being given in our state. But let me just say this, because for a lot of people, even before the COVID-19 situation, they didn't come to church either. It wasn't a matter of going to church because of a virus, or not going to church because of a virus. It was a matter of lack of conviction. And so I want to think about that for a few minutes, because the church is important. And here's what I've learned in my experience as a pastor, and even before I pastored, is that much of being a church doesn't happen during a church service. Much of being a body of believers is not so much about what happens, in our case, between 11 and 12 on Sundays, or between 6 and 7 on Sundays, or between 6:30 and 7:15 on Wednesdays, or the other formal meeting times we have. Being a church is about the development of relationships within the body. And I have a whole lot of stories I could share with you, but I jotted down a few people's names that I've encountered over the years, before ministry and even after ministry became a part of my life, that touched me. They touched me deeply and personally, and they touched me in just the ins and outs of life. And I want to share these names with you. I think of a couple back when I was in high school and college. Their names were Rick and Karen. They taught our singles class when I was in the New Orleans area. And every Friday night they opened their house for singles Bible study. And do you know, I learned as much about Christ through them outside of Bible study than I did inside of Bible study. I learned it as we were eating Doritos around their kitchen table, as we were singing songs in their living room. Rick was a guitar player, and we would sing all kind of choruses of the day and songs of the time. And I talked to Karen on the side. Rick was a barber, and I would get Rick to do my hair, and we'd talk about spiritual things. And this was back when I'm about 20 years of age. And I remember those days. And yes, they influenced me in a classroom. And yes, they influenced me in the formal setting. But I got to know them by connecting with them in life. So I met them in the church body. But they connected with me outside of formal meetings. I think of another guy. He's been in our church here, John Bell. John's in his mid-80s, lives in the New Orleans area now in an assisted living. And John and I prayed together for several years. He and I and several others that were at the church at the time, a bunch of men, got together on Tuesday nights, and we met in a second floor Sunday school area. And we would pray for 45 minutes to an hour and a half on a weekly basis. It was so compelling to want to be there because the power of God was in the room. Now understand this, there wasn't Bible study, there wasn't preaching, there wasn't singing, it was just prayer. And by being around John, I drew from him. Being in his presence, he refreshed my life. I actually spoke to him earlier today. He's like many others in senior adult facilities, he's kind of quarantined from everybody. But we got to visit and talk, and God's still using him. He says they have prayer meeting even there at his senior facility, and he's praying with people. I go back to when I was in seminary. One of the professors I had was Dr. Wilton. Dr. Wilton now pastors in South Carolina. Actually, his claim to fame is that he was Billy Graham's pastor toward the end of Billy Graham's life. And he'd go see Billy Graham once a week at his home in North Carolina. Well, when Don Wilton was teaching at New Orleans Seminary, I remember we had a class in evangelistic preaching. And Dr. Wilton invited a bunch of students who could fill his station wagon back in the late 80s to drive with him near Mobile, Alabama, to watch him preach and just to spend a day with him. And I took him up on it, and I got in his vehicle, and it was one of the greatest experiences I ever had in seminary. And it wasn't just to hear him preach, because I'd heard him preach a bunch. It was being connected with him in that personal environment. I think about pastoring in Iowa back there during the 90s. And my dad died, and during that time I came back after the funeral, and my director of missions, a guy named Phil, I loved Phil. He was so personal. And I remember one of the first meetings we had after my dad died. Phil and I were having one of our monthly required meetings because I was getting supplement from the National Convention, and he had to meet with me monthly. And we were talking about the death of my dad. His mother had died, I believe, a year earlier, and we both sat at my kitchen table and we cried together. It was a very, very emotional time. And I learned from that now that I serve as a director of missions. Just spend time with people. It's not what you preach, and it's not how you teach. It's about connecting with people. And so as we get back to church in the weeks to come, you might say, well, do I really need to get back to church? Is it that important? It absolutely is. It's not coming to hear me preach or listening to the worship music. It's not going through structured church programs. It's a connection with people in the ins and the outs of life. It's times we're sitting around a table in the fellowship hall. It's congratulating our seniors because they've reached a milestone. It's going to baby showers. It's family day. It's VBS. It's just being there with people. I think of what Paul wrote in 2 Timothy 1. I'll just briefly read this to you. 2 Timothy 1, verse 16. He says, "May the Lord show mercy to the household of Onesiphorus, because he often refreshed me and was not ashamed of my chains. On the contrary, when he was in Rome, he searched hard for me until he found me." Paul highlights a guy that we know very little about, but he does make a statement that I think could refer to all of us. He highlights a man who often refreshed him. You see, going to church is not about hearing Brother Steve preach. Going to church is being part of a people who refresh us. And I hope that the day comes where we all feel comfortable again, and that this virus is just in the history books. and we say, you know what, I have missed as much as anything being with the people of God. And I hope that this Sunday, as we do have that opportunity to get back, that many of you can come. And you might say, Brother, I'm still kind of scared, and I understand. So don't come. You know, if you've got underlying medical issues and physical concerns, just wait a few more weeks, and you can watch us on Facebook Live, or you can get us on YouTube. That'll all still be available. But do know this: in the long run, the refreshment of physically being with people is something you can't get over a television screen or on a cell phone. It's something that we really need. And I hope that you long for that. And that as we do get back, and the day will happen when we're back to a sense of what it used to be in the fellowship of the body, you would say, I sure want to get back with those people who refresh me. Let me also say this before I close with you today. For those of you that have been out of fellowship for a long time, this may be even sounding foreign to you. But listen, if you've been out of church for the last 2 months or the last 2 years, or you've been distant from people and you've gone through a lonely spell during the stay-at-home order, maybe it should perk your ears up to say, you know what, the pastor's right. It is time for me to be with the people that I can connect with. Because yes, I believe in Scripture. Maybe yes, I believe in the things of God. And yes, I'm born again. But I need to be with the people who connect with me in my life. So take this challenge today. I hope it has helped you. And I will look forward to being with you again, God willing, on Wednesday night when we have Bible study. Have a great afternoon. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.